Out here, water isn't worth money, it's worth your life. The wind came in low, dragging fine metallic dust across the cracked surface of the desert, whispering against Mason Hale's visor like sandpaper over glass, his HUD flickering with soft amber warnings as the numbers ticked down in slow, indifferent precision. Hydration, 12%, core temp rising, external heat reading 118 degrees Fahrenheit under the twin suns burning overhead without mercy. His boots sank half an inch into the brittle ground with every step, each movement measured, deliberate, conserving energy the way a dying man counts breaths, because out here, there was no rescue, no second chances, just distance and silence, and whatever you could carry on your back. And Mason carried very little now. A half-empty canteen clipped to his side, scratched, dented, more valuable than any weapon he'd ever held. He adjusted the strap across his shoulder, the fabric stiff with dried sweat, his jaw tight beneath the stubble as he scanned the horizon through a heat-warped shimmer. Nothing moved, nothing lived, and that was how he liked it now, because people, human or not, came with complications, and complications got you killed. That was a lesson he learned the hard way. One bad call, one moment of hesitation, one time choosing to help instead of walk away, and the memory still sat heavy in his chest like a weight he couldn't drop. His radio was dead, his squad long gone, and whatever version of him used to believe in saving others had been left behind somewhere between the wreckage and the silence that followed. He exhaled slowly, dry air catching in his throat, then froze, a flicker at the edge of his vision, small, barely there, something that didn't belong in a place like this. His hand instinctively hovered near his sidearm before he stopped himself, narrowed his eyes, adjusted the zoom on his visor, and there it was, a shape half buried in the sand near the twisted remains of a downed craft, the hull scorched, metal peeled back like it had tried to escape, the heat and failed, and beside it, barely moving, was a child, not human, not even close. Her skin carried a faint violet glow beneath the dust, like light trapped under glass, her limbs thin, fragile-looking, her head tilted slightly, as if even holding it up cost too much. Mason stood there for a long second, saying nothing, doing nothing, the wind filling the space between them. Because this was the moment, the one that decided everything. The moment where you either kept walking, or you didn't. His eyes shifted to the canteen at his side, then back to the child, then away again, a muscle in his jaw tightening, as if the decision itself was something physical, something painful, and for a heartbeat, he turned, one step, then another, boots pressing into the sand as he moved past her, leaving her behind the way this world demanded, clean, simple, survival. But then it came, soft, barely audible through the wind, a voice, thin and unsteady. Please, he stopped. Not because it was loud, not because it was urgent, but because it wasn't. Because it sounded like someone who already knew the answer, and asked anyway. Mason did not turn around right away, not fully, just enough for his visor to catch her in the edge of its display, a faint silhouette trembling against the glare, the wind tugging at what little fabric she had left, her small hand barely lifted from the ground, as if even that effort cost too much. His fingers tightened slightly against the strap of his canteen, the metal cool against his palm despite the heat. His mind already running through the numbers without permission, distance to next. Known outpost. Unknown, probability of survival with current water. Low, probability of survival without it. Negligible, he exhaled through his nose, slow, controlled, like he used to before making decisions that mattered. Except now they always mattered, every single one. He had learned that the hard way. Do not. He muttered under his breath, the word dry and brittle, like the land around him. He had seen this before. Different planet, different face, same outcome. Help someone and you bleed. For it, sometimes literally, sometimes not, but always in ways that stayed with you longer than they should. He took another step forward, then stopped again. The wind shifted, carrying a sound this time, not just a word but something softer, a breath, a fragile, uneven inhale that stuttered like it might not come again. Mason closed his eyes for half a second, just enough for the memory to try and surface. Voices, heat, the weight of someone he could not carry far enough. He opened them again, quickly, pushing it back where it belonged. Not my problem, he said, louder this time, like saying it might make it true. but his body had already betrayed him, because he was turning now, fully, boots grinding into the sand as he walked back the few yards he had just claimed as distance, each step heavier than the last, not from fatigue, but from something else, something he refused to name. The child did not move much as he approached, only her eyes tracking him slowly, wide, reflective, catching the harsh sunlight and turning it into something softer, almost like it did not belong here. Her skin, beneath the dust, held that faint violet shimmer again, subtle but unmistakable, like light trying to escape. He crouched down a few feet away, not too close, never too close, and studied her for a moment, checking for signs, threats, anything that would justify walking away again. But there was nothing, just a child, breathing shallow, her lips cracked, her voice barely forming words. Water, please. Mason looked at the canteen again, then back at her, his jaw tightening as if he could hold the decision there and not let it move. You should not be out here, he said, his voice rough, more to fill the silence than anything else. She blinked slowly, as if processing took effort, then whispered, I was not supposed to be. Something in the way she said it did not sound like confusion. It sounded like truth, simple and unguarded, and that made it worse somehow. Mason let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but without humor. Yeah, he muttered. None of us were. He unscrewed the cap halfway, then stopped, staring at the thin line of liquid visible inside. Clear, precious, final. His hand hovered there, caught between instinct and something older, something he thought he had buried out here in the dust. The wind pressed against his back, urging him forward, away. Survival had always been simple when you did not think too much, when you did not look too closely, but she was right there, and he had already turned around once, which meant something had already changed whether he liked it or not. Mason closed his eyes again, just for a second, then opened them, decision settling in quiet and irreversible. He stepped closer, extended the canteen toward her, without ceremony, without explanation, his voice low, almost flat. Do not waste it, he said, as if that made it a transaction instead of what it really was. Her small hands reached out slowly, carefully, like she was handling something fragile, something sacred, and when her fingers brushed against his for just a moment, the contact was brief, barely there, but it lingered longer than it should have, like a signal he did not understand. She lifted the canteen with both hands, took a small sip at first, then another, and Mason watched the level drop. With each swallow, each movement echoing somewhere deeper than it had any right to. He did not look away. He could not because of the water, but because of her eyes, the way they stayed on him even as she drank, not afraid, not grateful, just aware, as if she was seeing something he could not. And for the first time in a long while, Mason felt something unfamiliar press against the edges of his thoughts. Not hope, not yet, but something close enough to make him uncomfortable, something that made the desert feel just a little less empty, and that, more than anything, unsettled him. The canteen felt lighter the moment it left her hands, not just in weight, but in something harder to measure, and Mason noticed it immediately, the subtle shift in balance at his side, the absence of that quiet reassurance that had followed him across miles of empty ground. He tightened the cap with a small twist and clipped it back into place, though he already knew it did not matter anymore. His HUD updated without emotion. Hydration critical, recommended intake unavailable. He dismissed the alert with a flick of his eye, his attention drawn instead to the child as she lowered the canteen carefully, almost respectfully, as if she understood its value in a way most did not. Her breathing had steadied, still shallow but no longer erratic. The faint glow beneath her skin pulsing just slightly brighter now, subtle but there, like something waking up beneath the surface. Mason shifted his weight and stood, the joints in his suit letting out a soft mechanical hum. He glanced toward the horizon again, the same endless stretch of heat and distortion, but now it felt different, not safer, not better, just changed, like a line had been crossed without permission. That will not last long, he said, nodding toward the open desert, his voice even, practical, as if stating facts could anchor him back into something familiar. The child followed his gaze, her eyes narrowing slightly against the light. Then she looked back at him, studying his face through the visor, not curious in the usual way, but focused, deliberate. It was not meant to, she replied softly, her voice clearer now, still fragile but no longer breaking. Mason frowned slightly at that. The phrasing odd, too precise for someone her size. You got people nearby? He asked, scanning again out of habit more than hope. A ship, a signal, anything. She shook her head once, slow. No. Then after a pause, not anymore. The words settled heavier than they should have. Not dramatic, not emotional, just stated, and somehow that made them harder to ignore. Mason exhaled slowly, a dry breath that scraped against his throat. Then you need to move, he said, already turning slightly, pointing toward a distant ridge, barely visible through the heat waves. There is higher ground that way. Sometimes you get shade. Maybe a structure if you are lucky. He hesitated for a fraction of a second before adding. Better than staying here. He did not offer to carry her, did not offer to stay. That was the line. The one he had already crossed once and would not cross again. Not fully. Not yet. The child looked in the direction he pointed, then back at him. And for a moment she did not move, as if weighing something. Unseen. Then slowly, carefully, she pushed herself upright, her movements unsteady but determined, her feet pressing into the sand as she found balance. And when she stood fully, Mason noticed something he had not before. The way the air around her seemed to shift slightly, like heat bending light, but softer, more controlled. He blinked once, unsure if it was just the sun playing tricks. You should go, he said, more firmly now. Needing motion, needing distance, he took a step back, then another, already turning away, already telling himself it was done, that whatever this was had ended the moment the water changed hands. But then her voice came again, stronger this time, not pleading, not weak, just clear. Why did you do it? Mason stopped, not turning, his back to her, the question hanging there in the open air. Between them, simple, direct, and for a moment he did not have an answer that fit the version of himself he had been trying to become. His fingers flexed slightly at his side, the phantom weight of the canteen still there. Because you asked, he said finally, the words coming out rough, incomplete, but enough. He started walking again, each step deliberate, controlled, putting distance where it belonged. But behind him, the child did not respond right away, and when she did, her voice carried something different now, something quieter but deeper, like a realization settling into place. No, she said softly, almost to herself. That is not why. Mason did not hear the rest, or maybe he chose not to, the wind rising again, carrying her words away as he moved forward into the heat, telling himself that this was how it stayed. A moment, nothing more, just another decision in a long line of them. But somewhere beneath the noise of the desert and the steady rhythm of his steps, something had already shifted, something that would not stay buried this time, no matter how far he walked. The ridge did not get any closer. No matter how long Mason walked, the heat bending distance into something dishonest, his boots dragging slightly now, each step a fraction slower than the last, the suit compensating where it could, redistributing strain, adjusting micro-cooling systems that were already operating beyond recommended limits. His HUD pulsed a steady warning in the corner of his vision, hydration critical, cognitive function degrading. He ignored it, like he ignored most things. These days, because numbers did not change outcomes out here. Only choices did, and he had already made his. The wind shifted direction, hotter now, carrying the faint scent of scorched metal and something else beneath it, something clean, almost sterile. It did not belong in a place like this. Mason slowed, his brow tightening as he scanned the horizon again. Nothing visible, no structures, no movement. Just the endless shimmer of heat and the distant outline of the ridge, but the feeling did not match the view. Something was off, subtle but persistent, like the air itself was holding its breath. He took another step and the ground beneath his boot felt different, firmer, less brittle. He looked down, expecting cracked dust and scattered debris, but instead saw a smoother surface, not natural, not quite artificial either, just altered. He blinked, once, twice, as if clearing his vision might reset the world back to what it was supposed to be. But it did not change. The shift remained, spreading outward in a faint, almost imperceptible gradient. The temperature reading on his HUD flickered, then recalibrated, dropping by 2 degrees, then 3, Mason stopped walking entirely now, turning slowly in place, his instincts sharpening despite the fatigue. This was not random. This was not environment. This was influence, and influence meant something or someone was close. His gaze moved back the way he came, toward the barely visible wreckage and the small figure he had left behind. Except she was no longer there, not where she had been. The space was empty, untouched, as if she had never been there at all. Mason's chest tightened slightly. Not panic. Not yet. Just awareness shifting into something more alert. He took a step back, then another, his hand hovering near his sidearm. Again out of habit. Not because he expected a threat, but because he no longer trusted the silence. The wind died down suddenly, cutting off mid-gust like someone had turned a switch. The world went still, unnaturally still, and then he heard it. Not a sound exactly. More like a presence pressing gently against his awareness, subtle, controlled, deliberate. You are leaving. The voice came from behind him, clear, steady, and nothing like it had been before. Mason turned, slower this time, measured, and there she stood several yards away, no longer struggling to stand, no longer swaying with weakness, her posture straight, balanced, her small frame unchanged but somehow different. The faint violet glow beneath her skin, now visible even in full sunlight, tracing soft patterns along her arms and face like veins of light. Her eyes held his without wavering, not as a child looks at an adult, but as an equal studies another. Mason did not move closer, did not speak right away. He just watched, taking in the details, recalibrating everything he thought he understood about the last few minutes. You should not be able to stand like that, he said finally, his voice low, controlled. She tilted her head slightly, as if considering the statement rather than reacting to it. I should not have needed your water, she replied, her tone calm, factual. Mason exhaled slowly, a faint, humorless breath. Yeah, he muttered, figured as much. The space between them felt different now, charged in a way he could not define, not dangerous, not safe, just significant, like something important had already happened and he was only now catching up to it. His eyes narrowed slightly, studying her again. So what are you? He asked, not demanding, just asking, because out here, answers were rare and questions cost nothing. She did not respond immediately, her gaze shifting briefly to the horizon, then back to him. And when she spoke, her voice carried something deeper than before, something that resonated beyond the air itself. I am the reason you stopped walking. Mason felt that settle somewhere inside him, heavier than the words should have been, and for the first time since he left the wreckage, he did not try to move away. Mason did not answer right away, not because he did not understand her words, but because he did, and that was the problem. They did not sound like a threat, they did not sound like a warning, they sounded like a statement that had already been decided long before he arrived. His eyes remained fixed on her, tracking every small detail, the way the light beneath her skin moved in slow, deliberate pulses, not random, not reactive, controlled, like a system operating at a level he could not see. The air around her carried that same subtle distortion again, a gentle ripple that softened the harsh edges of the desert, and Mason realized something then, something that settled deep and uncomfortable. The environment had not changed on its own, it had changed around her, or because of her. He shifted his stance slightly, grounding himself. The sand beneath his boots no longer felt as brittle. The temperature reading on his HUD continued to drop in small increments, 1 degree at a time, as if the world itself was adjusting to her presence. You said you were not supposed to be here, he said, his voice steady, measured, keeping his tone neutral the way he had been trained to do in situations that did not make sense yet. She nodded once, a small movement, but certain. This place is not meant to hold life for long, she replied, her gaze drifting briefly across the horizon, as if she was seeing more than what was visible. It is a filter. Mason frowned slightly at that, the word unfamiliar in this context. A filter, he repeated, testing it. For what? She looked back at him then, and there was something different in her expression now, not emotion exactly, but focus sharpening into something more precise. For choice, she said, the word landing with quiet weight. Mason let out a slow breath, shaking his head once as if trying to clear the shape of the conversation into something he could work with. You are telling me this whole place is some kind of test, he said, not mocking, just stating it plainly. She tilted her head again, considering, then gave a slight nod. In a way, Mason glanced around again, the endless desert stretching out in every direction, unchanged in appearance, but no longer feeling entirely real in the way it had before. And you, he added, bringing his focus back to her. What part do you play in that? She did not answer immediately, her eyes studying him again, not evaluating his strength or his weapons or anything surface level, but something deeper, something that made him feel seen in a way he had not been in a long time. I observe, she said finally. I measure. Mason huffed softly under his breath, a faint, dry sound. Yeah, he muttered, figured that too. He shifted his weight again, his body reminding him of its limits now, the dryness in his throat sharper, the fatigue settling heavier into his limbs, the cost of his decision catching up with him in quiet, unavoidable ways. He did not reach for the canteen, did not check it. He already knew what was left inside, which was almost nothing. His vision blurred slightly at the edges for a brief second before stabilizing, and he ignored that as well, focusing instead on her, because somehow she felt more immediate than his own condition. So what happens now? He asked, not demanding, not expecting a clear answer, just asking because the question needed to exist. She stepped forward then, just one small step, but the effect was immediate. The air cooled slightly again, the pressure of the heat easing just enough to be noticeable. Mason did not step back this time. He held his ground, watching her. Now, she said softly. You continue. He frowned, confusion flickering across his face. Continue what? She met his gaze directly, her voice calm, certain. The part where you decide who you are. Mason let that sit for a moment, the words echoing in the space between them. And for the first time in a long while, the answer was not immediate, not automatic. It did not come from instinct or training or survival. It just waited, and that uncertainty, more than anything else, made him realize this was not over, not even close. Mason did not move, not forward, not back, just stood there with the weight of her words settling into him in a way that felt heavier than the heat ever had. The idea of choice lingering longer than it should, because out here, choice had always been simple, survival or not. Keep walking or fall behind. Help no one and owe nothing. That was the rule he had rebuilt himself around. Clean, efficient, and empty. But now it did not fit as well as it used to. Not after he had already broken it once. His tongue felt dry against the roof of his mouth, his throat tightening slightly as his body reminded him again of what he had given away. The absence of water, now a constant pressure rather than a distant concern. His HUD flickered again, warning signals stacking quietly in the corner of his vision. But he did not look at them. His focus stayed on her, because somehow she felt more real than the numbers did, more immediate than the slow decline his system was trying to quantify. You talk. Like this is still happening, he said, his voice low, steady, but edged with something new, something uncertain. Like I have not already made the choice. She watched him carefully, her expression unchanged, but there was a slight shift in the light beneath her skin, a soft ripple that moved outward and then settled again. You made one choice, she replied, her tone calm, precise, not the last. Mason let out a faint breath through his nose, almost a scoff, but without the energy behind it. There is always a last one, he said quietly, more to himself than to her. His knees felt heavier now, the subtle strain building in his legs, his balance adjusting in small, automatic corrections as his body tried to conserve what little strength remained. He shifted his stance again, but this time it was slower, less controlled, and than before, the wind reduced to a distant whisper rather than a constant force. The desert around them no longer felt hostile, but it did not feel safe either. It felt aware, as if every step was being noted, recorded in ways he could not see. Mason's thoughts shifted inward, not to memories this time, but to something quieter, more present, the simple fact that he had stopped walking away, that he had turned back when he did not have to, that he was still here, still moving forward even when. The logical path would have been to conserve what little he had left and minimize risk. He exhaled slowly, the dryness still there, the fatigue still pressing in at the edges, but it no longer felt like the only thing defining him. What happens if I stop? He asked after a while. The question simple, direct, She answered just as simply. Then you stop. Mason let out a faint, almost amused breath at that. Not humor, just acknowledgement of the clarity. No consequences, no punishment. He pressed. She turned her head slightly toward him, her eyes calm, unwavering. Only outcome, she said. Mason nodded once, accepting that, because it fit, because it made sense in a way nothing else had so far. There was no force pushing him, no threat behind him, no reward promised ahead, just the path and the choice to keep walking it. He adjusted his shoulders slightly, the weight of his gear shifting, lighter than before in one way, heavier in another. Then I keep going, he said quietly, like something choosing to be seen rather than appearing all at once. The air ahead shimmered less with heat and more with clarity, the distortion peeling back layer by layer to reveal something beneath it, something structured. The ground under his boots transitioned again, smoother now, less like desert and more like a surface that had been designed but weathered by time. His steps grew steadier, not because his body had recovered. It had not. The dryness still lingered, the fatigue still pressed into his muscles, but because whatever force had been maintaining him had become more consistent, more stable, like it no longer needed to adjust. He glanced briefly at his HUD, the warnings still present but no longer urgent, the readings hovering in a strange balance between decline and support, and he realized then that he was no longer walking toward survival. He was walking toward something else entirely. The girl remained beside him, her presence unchanged in position but altered in weight. She no longer felt like a companion being observed. She felt like a constant that had always been part of this place, something that belonged here in a way he did not. You said most paths lead to the same end, Mason said after a while, his voice quiet, steady. What about this one? She did not answer immediately, her gaze fixed ahead, and when he followed it, he finally saw it clearly. A structure rising from the shifting ground, not large in the way cities were large, but significant in a way that made everything around it feel secondary. Its surface smooth and reflective without being metallic. Its shape neither geometric nor organic, but something between, like it had been formed by intention rather than construction. Mason slowed slightly, not out of fear, but out of recognition. This was the point, the place where whatever this was would stop being abstract and become real. This path does not end, she said softly. Mason glanced at her, then back at it had not before. Each step bringing the structure into sharper focus, faint lines of light tracing across its surface, pulsing in slow, deliberate patterns that matched the rhythm beneath her skin. Mason noticed it immediately, the synchronization too precise to ignore. That is yours, he said, not a question. She looked at him briefly, then back ahead. It is where I come from, she answered. Mason let out a slow breath, the realization settling in fully now. This was not just a test, not just an environment. It was a system, and she was not just part of it. She was central to it. His steps slowed further as they approached the outer edge of the structure. The air here felt different again, not cooler, not warmer, just stable, like the fluctuations of the desert had been removed entirely. His suit registered it as neutral, balanced, a reading he had not seen since before the crash. He stopped just short of the threshold, the ground beneath him now smooth and unbroken. The boundary between what had been and what was ahead clearly defined without any visible line. So this is where it ends for me, he said quietly, more to himself than to her. She stepped slightly ahead of him for the first time, turning to face him fully, and in that moment, the light beneath her skin brightened, not blinding, not overwhelming, just complete. No, she said, her voice steady, certain in a way it had not been before. This is where it becomes known. Mason held her gaze, the weight of everything that had happened settling into a single point of understanding. He did not ask what that meant. He did not need to, because whatever came next was not something that could be explained before it was experienced. And for the first time since he stepped onto this planet, he did not feel the need to question it. He simply stood there, at the edge of something he had never expected to reach, and waited. Mason stepped forward before the moment could ask anything more of him, his boot crossing the invisible threshold with no resistance, no sound, just a quiet shift in the way the world held itself together, the ground beneath him smoothing further until it no longer felt like something he was walking on, but something supporting him without effort. the air around.